Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is Carmen from Easy Language. So this is the second video of my introduction to Cantonese series, and today what I'll be talking about are the initials that are used in the Jyutping system. So first of all, let's go through some history. So I got this extract from Wikipedia. So the Jyutping system is, I would say, the more kind of modern romanization of Cantonese. It is a departure from all the previous romanization systems, which were like approximately 12, which includes Robert Morrison's pioneering work of 1828, and the widely used standard romanization, Yale and Sydney Lyle systems. So nowadays, if you were to study Cantonese and you probably might have noticed in some textbooks, like the very popular Teach Yourself textbook series, which use the Yale system. While it can be good, I always feel like the Yale system is kind of out of date because it still kind of like shows the two different high tones, and it doesn't show you like the pitches. Like I said before, what's different about Cantonese and Mandarin, is that Mandarin, the pitches isn't like very important, right? So you've got one rising tone, one falling tone, one tone that dips, and then one flat tone. In Cantonese, though, you've got 3 flat tones, 2 rising tones, and then 1 falling tone. So the pitches that you produce these tones at is very important, and the Yale system doesn't necessarily reflect that very clearly, whereas the Jyutping system indicates it more. So like the general rule is that the higher number, the higher the tone. The lower the number, the lower the tone. So that's why I always kind of recommend using the Jyutping system, because like the numbers might be confusing at first, but once you have become familiar with it, it will be a lot easier for you to actually follow. So the Jyutping system has introduced the Z and the C initials and the use of the EO and OE finals. So finals I will be explaining in the next video because there are lots of them. And they've also replaced the Y, like the Y sound, which was used in all the previous systems, with the J. In 2018, the Jyutping system was updated to include the A and the OET finals to reflect syllables recognized to be part of the Cantonese phonology in 1997 by the Jyutping Workgroup of the Linguistic Society of Hong Kong. So if you watched my previous video, the Jyutping system was developed around 1990s, so it's actually like relatively more recent than the previous systems. So that's why I would teach my courses in Jyutping. Okay. So let's begin by looking at the initials. Okay, so initials, or otherwise known as the consonants, so we have about 19 of them. Okay, so let's begin by the first set. So here we have B, P, and P. So like my Mandarin video, I will give you an English equivalent and also an example, and also a phonemic pronunciation. Please do bear in mind that the Jyutping system, like the pinyin system, some of the letters they use Latin alphabet that we are familiar with in English, but the pronunciation sometimes isn't quite the same. Okay, so I'll go through them with you, especially with your aspirated and inaspirated like consonants. So don't think of it as English, don't apply English to this system unless there are like the consonants that are the most similar to English. But I'll explain these to you while we go through. So let's first have a look at B. So the B is pronounced like a B sound, like in bus. It's kind of edging towards the P as well. So it's like B, it's a very strong B sound. Okay, so it sounds like bus, right? But not quite, right? It's like a P, B, B, bus. So it's very strong and a very emphasized B sound. So slightly aspirated as well. Bus. So an example of this B initial would be ba si. Ba si. Okay, so refer to my ping chart down here in the corner, the lower right corner, to help you with the tones. The next initial we have is the P. Okay, so in the phonemic pronunciation, I put like a superscript H next to it. The reason why I did that is because P is aspirated, which means that you kind of exhale while you're producing the sound. So it's kind of like P, so it's not like P, but you also have a H afterwards, so like a H sound. So it's like p, okay? So it's an aspirated. So it's kind of like really push out that air whilst you're pronouncing it. So I've got English equivalent would be pan, right? But again, make sure that you kind of produce the h sound afterwards. So it's like p, han, pan. Okay? So an example of this would be pa, pa, which means afraid. Okay. The next one is the M. Okay, so M is pretty straightforward. It's like a m sound, maybe a little like elongate the m sound a little bit. So like mum. Okay, I guess it'll be pretty much the same as you would have in English. So an example for this would be ma, ma, which means horse. Finally, in this list, we've got the F sound. Again, this F sound is pretty much the same as it is in English. So it's like f, f. So where your teeth, your lower teeth touches the top of your lips. So like f. So an English equivalent would be like f from far. An example would be fa, fa, which means flower. Okay. Now let's look at the next set. So the next set we've got D, T, N, and L. So let's have a look at the D. So kind of like the B. The D isn't exactly like a D sound we have like in English. It's slightly edged towards the T sound, but it is very subtle. Okay, so like the B is very subtle, and sometimes you don't really notice it in spoken Cantonese. So again, the English equivalent I put is dad. Example I gave is taxi, taxi, which means taxi. Fun fact, basi for bus and taxi for taxi are loaned from the English words bus and taxi respectively. So yeah, basi, taxi. Next up we have T. So this one, similar to the P sound, it's aspirated. So there's a superscript H to show that. So it's like T and then so afterwards. Okay, so it's aspirated. So kind of exhale when you pronounce it. Okay, so an example I have is like ta-da, because I find that it's slightly aspirated, like ta-da. But do remember that there is like a more emphasis on the afterwards, so the exhale that comes afterwards. Okay, example I have is ta, ta, which means he or him. Okay, next up is N, which is pretty much the same as you would have in English. It's like a n, so like n for north. Example I have is nei, nei, which means you. Next up we have the l sound, which is the L. Again, kind of pretty much the same as it is in English, like in l as in lie. And the example I put is lie, lie, which means to pull. So next up we have G, K, N, G, and H. Okay, so let's begin with the G. Okay, so this kind of follows the same kind of structure as it does before. So G, like G, but a little bit towards a K sound. Okay, again, very subtle, not very noticeable. So if you don't really get if you can't pinpoint that sound, it's okay. You can stick to the G. Okay, so it's like G in guy. An example would be ga, ga, which means price. Next up, we've got a K, which is aspirated. So it's like an aspirated version of the G sound, if you may. So again, this one's actually more of a K sound rather than a G sound, actually. So it's more K, H afterwards. Okay, so it's like car. So this one, be careful, it's not like a G. Okay, so it's different to a G. This one's more like a K. But except you exhale. K. Okay? So yeah, so that equivalent will be like K from car, except you go car if you were to pronounce it properly. Example would be cut, cut. Okay, which means to cough. So I'll explain to you the finals, but I'll tell you like right now quickly, kind of briefly. So when you see a single A vowel used as a final, it's usually pronounced like a U. Whereas if you see double A as in ga, it is like a sound, more of an sound. But again, I will explain this to you in more detail in the next video about the finals. Okay, so next up we have ng, and this is pronounced ng. So it's kind of like sing in English. So this one, unlike in English though, ng is used as an initial and not as a final. It can be used as a final, but it's also used as an initial. Whereas in English, you don't really see ng used as an initial. Okay, so ng as in sing. An example would be ngõ, which means I or me. Finally, we've got h, which is pretty much the same as the one in English. So like in honey, an example would be ha, which means shrimp or prawns. Next up, we have GW, KW, and W, so your W's. Okay, so this one's got superscript W, which means that it's slightly pronounced, but not really like, not like w kind of way. So it's like a very subtle, you touch the W like in a subtle way. So I can't think of any English equivalent, so I just left it blank. So yeah, so GW, it says K superscript W for the phonemic pronunciation, but it is, it's not K, because we already have something that actually is K, right? So, which is the next one, like the second one there. But this GW is like Gu, literally just like Gu. Okay, the example here is Gua, which means to hang. Okay, so yeah, like I said, the G kind of edges towards the K sound, but not quite K. It is like an inaspirated K, if you may. And then KW is cake, actually like a K sound, with a slight touch of a W sound, and then, because it's aspirated, you got the H. So, K. Okay, so remember exhale for the aspirated tones. K. Okay, so qua is an example. Qua, which means to exaggerate. And finally, we've got W, which is pretty much the same as you would have in English, which is go w, like w as in from war. Example here is wa, which means speech. Okay. So here's the next set, which are the strange ones, except for S. So these are the strange ones you probably be quite confused with in English. You got Z, C, S, and J. So for Z, okay, so you don't pronounce it Z like you do in English. You pronounce it like a TS, kind of like J sound almost, right? So J, T, J. Okay, so it's kind of like J, yeah, like a J sound. So you have this one, you have to follow the phonemic alphabet to actually get the phonemic pronunciation. So let's see it as T. Okay, so it's not like that, it's like J. Okay, which the English equivalent would be J. Oh, sorry, joy. So the Z actually sounds like a J sound, right? So it's in joy. Okay, so example I have here is joy, which means again. Okay, so J, so you can notice like a J sound. So if in doubt, when you see the Z initial, just say J for it. For C, it's kind of like a ch sound. It's also aspirated because notice a superscript H, so like ch. But it's kind of less like a strong ch sound. I always like to describe this. It's kind of between a T and a CH sound, so like ch. But like again, if you say ch, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't sound weird or anything, so it's perfectly fine. So you can say ch. So ch as in chore. So example for this would be choi, which means talent. Next up we have S, which is pretty much the same as we have in English, like the which is a s sound. So s as in sun. An example for that would be sa, sa, which means sand. Lastly, we have the J, which is, so as you can see, the phonemic pronunciation says J, right? But we don't pronounce it J. Okay, so if you follow the phonemic alphabet, you will notice that the J in the phonemic alphabet is actually a J sound. So Y, like a Y. Okay, so J, Y. So Y as in yacht. Okay, an example for this would be yan. Yan, which means people. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something new, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time in my video to talk about the finals of Jyutping. Bye! Have a lovely day!